Okay, the Cleveland Browns have defeated the Baltimore Ravens 33-31, and this is definitely a podcast where both hosts believe from start to finish that the Browns were going to win this game and never, ever wavered.
I'm just going to stop texting you during games. I'm going to keep everything bottled in.
No, because listen, that gif of all the Browns players shoving the Ravens 5 minutes into the game, that was about what it was going to take to get you to the podcast, the way things were going.
Yes, the first 4 minutes, I was ready. I was hanging my Christmas lights up outside, and I was ready just to throw in the towel and go back outside and find something else to do, which I'm sure a lot of people related to.
Trust me, given, since starting at the OBR, I do a lot of their premium forums during the game, and there were a whole lot of people who went to do yard work.
Yeah. It was a really nice day yesterday. That's the other thing. Like it wasn't like it was cold, but
we were pretty
I'm going to say this before we get into it. I do have to admit that I had zero hope, and we will get into that. But I know that I have family members listening to this podcast who are going to say exactly what Pete said. I had zero faith. I was very negative. I was a huge pessimist throughout the entire game. Listen. But I have to say, my mother and my husband were both down because I usually am optimistic.
I have been sort of waiting for the Browns to have a game where they just, given everything that they've been putting into these games since the bye week, where the 49ers were, everything they leave on the field, and the Colts, everything they leave on the field, and it coming down to the wire. And then the Seahawks looked like it was going to be that game where they score 17 points in the first quarter. And you're like, okay. And it's a West Coast trip. And you're sort of like, all right, we were expecting one of these. And every time they have fought back, and this was no different. And the Browns were down 14-0 almost immediately. And you thought, I definitely thought, okay, this is that game. Deshaun Watson isn't, yes, it was the Cardinals, but, is he really ready to go and everything else? And you're just sort of waiting for that. You could call it a letdown. I think more than anything would be just a sign of just physical and emotional exhaustion from everything they put into it. And to their credit, they did all the things. They came back and managed to find a way to win this game. And now they find themselves 6-3. This game came down, a game that came down to the wire was the difference between the Baltimore Ravens having a commanding lead for the AFC North division at 8-2 or 7-2, 8-2, somewhere at 8-2, I think. And being up 3 games versus allowing the Browns to be right back in the mix. And what's really funny about the Ravens part about this is the Ravens came into this game 7-2. Now they're 7-3. If they lose to the Bengals on Thursday, they will have gone from first to last in the division in a matter of 2 weeks, because that's how close the AFC North is, where the last place team, the Bengals, has 4 losses. It's a testament to just how good
I find that very annoying.
Yes, it's obnoxious.
It's very annoying.
It's the best division in football. It's not even close right now. But yeah, I mean, it's just been
a bloodbath.
Yeah, which is, to our credit, because we're always right. We said it was going to be just a slugfest the whole way, and that this season was just going to be stressful from the word go, and that every game was going to matter, and you were going to need all of it. So that's laying the groundwork for this game, and how close we were to myself and Maddox having to do the podcast today.
He would have been hyped, by the way.
Yes, I'm sure he would have. So look, this is where we're at. The Browns open up the game. The Browns try to throw a pass on the second play of the game. Kyle Hamilton makes a great break, tips the ball straight up in the air, intercepts it, has the time to dust the football off before walking into the end zone, and makes a point of doing so. And here we are, down 7-0. And the immediate thought is, this is the second time just against the division on the road that this has started like this. And you're just like, okay,
Deja vu.
I'm ready for bed.
Deja vu. I hate it's particularly the tipped ball interception pick six that it drives me crazy more than anything.
Tipped balls have become a theme this season. It's insane.
So many on both sides, obviously.
Yes, no, good and bad. Seahawks bad. Last week, the Cardinals
Touchdown?
good, and then you had one of each in this game.
So bizarre.
So you immediately go down 7-0. Browns offense gets the ball back. They go nowhere and punt. And then the Ravens offense proceeds to go right down the field. And to me, I did a couple podcasts and wrote a couple things talking about this game. And the Browns defense came out and did exactly what I thought they were going to do, which catered right to the Ravens' strengths. They came out with their aggressive man coverage and sent a lot of bodies down, aggressively to try to get quick pressure on Lamar Jackson. And the Ravens did those delayed handoffs where guys had flown up the field and there was nobody left. And the Keaton Mitchell plays a perfect example, and he just scoots for 39 yards and a touchdown. And at that point, I'm just like, again, not loving this. I'm ready for this to just be over already. And to their credit, and I was enraged at Jim Schwartz because it felt like. So in my context of talking about this game is the Ravens offense challenges the Browns defense to get out of their identity. The Browns defense, identity-wise, wants to be in man coverage, wants to be super aggressive with their defensive line and give them freedom. That really is difficult to do against the Baltimore Ravens. Between their offensive line and having Lamar Jackson, those guys can punish you playing both man and being so aggressive because you have a quarterback who's that dangerous with his legs. And then you have the ability for their offensive line to hold up long enough to create, I would just say they basically parry the Browns defensive line long enough to just create these open holes. And then a back like Keaton Mitchell or Lamar Jackson himself has all kinds of running room. And, the first few drives of the game, I was just ticked off because it was doing exactly what I did not want them to do. Now, I give Jim Schwartz a ton of credit because they didn't adjust once, they adjusted twice. They came in with their original game plan, which I hated. And then they had sort of two counters to sort of switch things up. And for anyone who watches, as I do, and Bree does religiously, in part because I send her all the clips, Brian Baldinger standing up and wherever he records, breaking down the Browns sending a couple different waves of defenders to sort of corral him. That was one way to do it, where they just kept him in the pocket and made life miserable for him. And then they mixed in more zone looks, which attributed to which was the coverage they ran on the Greg Newsome interception was cover 3. And they just kept doing these things, and it really kept the Ravens off balance to the point where John Harbaugh is answering questions of hey, where'd Keaton Mitchell go? And all these other things. You're sitting there going, yeah, the Browns kind of outcoached them. And certainly I'm focusing on Jim Schwartz here, but when we talk about the offensive side of the ball, there was a lot of that, particularly in the second half, where the Browns just outsmarted the Ravens. And let's touch on something Bree always likes to talk about. They out-physicaled the Ravens for 4 quarters.
Okay, yeah, I have a lot of thoughts here. Well, first of all, I will just say, to summarize the game quickly, is really just a tale of two halves. Because like you said, it felt like the Browns got outcoached during the first half. And then Deshaun Watson's play obviously wasn't great in the first half. And then kind of those scripts flipped. And I thought Kevin Stefanski, it was a masterclass. I thought that for the most part, being able to adjust, being able to counter certain things that were happening, and the fact that Keaton Mitchell was pretty much non-existent in that game. I mean, if you're a Ravens fan, number one, I'm all over the place right now because there's so many thoughts running through my head and I have 3 pages of prepared notes, but we're just going to wing it, Pete. So this game reminded me of the Jets game last year, where if you are a Ravens fan, you have that game won. Absolutely zero reason to lose that football game. And the Browns came up with it, and there was just physical dominance on display that second half, and particularly the fourth quarter. I mean, Pete, those guys were gassed, both offense, defense. Uh, they were playing their hearts out, and that is something that I'm not used to seeing as a fan, especially coming from behind. Again, just something that I'm not used to seeing.
Yeah, Keaton Mitchell ended up with 3 carries. One of them went for 39.
I was going to say
He had 39 rushing yards on one play. He had 34 rushing yards in the game because they tried.
That almost seems criminal. I was talking to my dad about the game a little bit, and it kind of reminded me of Nick Chubb in 2018 when Hugh just refused to play him, and he would like get 3 carries in a game and get like 89 yards. But
the famous
whatever.
game was 3 carries, 101 yards, and 2 touchdowns against the Raiders. Yeah, look, I mean, and what did they do with Keaton Mitchell on one of those plays? The reason he had 34 yards, not 39, is because they did the end around. Oh, they did their variation.
They got that play out of
hated Elijah Moore jet sweep, and the Browns exactly. corralled it in the backfield. This is always the thing that I always laugh at, because people are like, why did the Browns keep doing this? Why does Kevin Stefanski keep doing these jet sweeps? And I always sit there thinking, I watch every team do this every week, and every fan base is sitting there yelling the same thing. And why do you keep doing this? Because occasionally it works, and occasionally it does produce big yards. But yeah, it was, Keaton Mitchell was just taken out of the game. I thought maybe it was injury related, because he had hurt his hamstring in one of the practices leading up to the game. But then John Harbaugh just sort of came out and said, no, it's the coaching staff still trying to get comfortable with the player that they're trying to learn to trust and all this other stuff, and that they should have gotten him more involved, which is, I'm always happy to hear that from the other team's coach. But yeah, so you get through those first few drives, and the thing that was frustrating about that is because the Browns end up down 17-3. And even on the field goal drive, the Browns had a chance to get off the field and had penalties that extended the drive, and the Ravens were ultimately able to kick a field goal. But it felt like the Browns were starting to right the ship a little bit in terms of just getting their ground and sort of equalizing, even though the score wasn't right. But then we ran into this situation where the Browns, because after the first 3 drives, interception, punt, other than the drive that ended before the half, every drive the Browns had from there on out got points, against what is, by reputation and by the numbers, was the 1 or 2 defense in the NFL, depending on which metrics you look at. But in the first half, it was incredibly frustrating because they kept moving the ball well. It wasn't pretty often, and they were having to earn it, having to work for it, is they kept falling short and having to kick field goals. And this was the classic situation where you were in a game where the other team's scoring touchdowns and you're kicking field goals. And towards the end of the half, you started feeling like the Browns were better than the Ravens, sort of in how things were going. It just wasn't, the points weren't there. I remember thinking going into the half, the Browns could be winning this game if they just finished a couple drives. And they weren't.
Not to mention, I was thinking the same thing, but the other piece was the points off of turnovers, because I was thinking, you were in the second quarter and it was 17-6. And I said to my husband, I was like, if you wipe off that touchdown, it's a completely different game.
Yeah. And, penalties and other miscues, which were a theme in this game. I'm fascinated by the fact that some Ravens executive is pissed about Cedric Tillman kicking Kyle Van Noy's ass, given the amount of phantom calls that I saw in this game, or things that just didn't make any sense. For all the penalties that had gone the Browns' way throughout, different points of the game, like the Colts game and whatever, it felt like the Browns were getting all of that. The balance was coming all in this game, where they were getting all these weird calls. It was balancing it out, and to have that guy complain about that one play was fascinating to me. Anyway, so yeah, it was ugly. I mean, Deshaun Watson in the first half was 6 of 20. Now, some of those were throwaways, some of those were, I don't think it was quite as bad as those numbers suggested. He was running a little bit, did some okay things, but like they were missing opportunities. They weren't completing drives, or they had penalties that erased things. And it just looked clunky. And I think, and again, going into the half, I thought the Browns had sort of stabilized. I thought they could be winning. And what I thought at that time, given everything that was happening, was that the Browns were a franchise quarterback away, or a good quarterback away, whatever, from winning this game. They needed that to sort of beat the Ravens. Now, fortunately, in the second half, and of course it took an injury, because it always seems to with Deshaun Watson. If you want to play better, hit him. He came out and delivered. He was everything that the Browns needed him to be in the second half. 14-14, 134 yards, had a touchdown, had a couple of good scrambles, did a number of smart things, and to the credit of him and the offense, it wasn't as if they had it was perfect, like it was easy. There were sacks, there were penalties, there were oftentimes miscues, and because of things that were out of their control, at least from the offensive standpoint, they only had the ball 3 times in the second half. Touchdown, game-winning field goal, because obviously they had the muff punt by James Prochet, and they had the pick 6 by Greg Newsome. So you didn't get the ball those times. Now you're going to live with defensive touchdowns, but the Prochet thing was obviously a big deal. But they had the first drive that they got was after the defense immediately gave up a touchdown, the Odell Beckham touchdown, which just made me angry on any number of levels.
Okay. I got to pause there.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I got to rewind for a minute, just in the second half, just to talk through like the headspace. So not only was Deshaun playing poorly, his receivers weren't really doing him a ton of favors. Like there were drop passes. There were times where Deshaun did make the throw and his receivers didn't catch the ball. So things were just not falling into place, I guess, if you will. And then they end up intercepting Lamar, and then they couldn't do anything with it. So that was really frustrating to me and didn't give me a lot of hope. So going into halftime, I was extremely frustrated. And then the Ravens come out because they get the ball after halftime, and obviously they're still in the lead. What it was it 6-17?
17-9 coming out
17-9. Thank you. Yeah, at that point I was like, well, if we can only kick field goals, this is going to be a really long game. So the OBJ slant pass for a touchdown, I wrote into my notes, that made me want to die, because of course it was OBJ.
Yes.
Of course it was a slant. Of course he scored a touchdown off of it, because that was what we couldn't figure out, how to unlock OBJ. And then not to mention it's Ton Munkin calling the freaking plays.
Yeah.
I wanted to literally rip my hair out. And to add insult to injury, my daughter's sitting there like background watching the game here and there, and she goes, OBJ's not on the Browns anymore. It's like, nope, hasn't been on the Browns for a while. She goes, She goes, they always trade away the good players. And I was like, ouch, straight to my heart. So she was really upset by that.
Yeah, and it was Mike Ford on him because Denzel Ward had gotten hurt. And you're sitting there going, why the hell is Mike Ford out there guarding Odell Beckham? And it's funny because that was Odell Beckham's only catch. 1 catch, 40 yards, and a touchdown. Targeted twice. The same thing with like him and Jadeveon Clowney. I just want to beat them. I don't have any ill will towards them necessarily. I want to beat them because they are not on this team. So that leads me to the other question is, how did you come out on Kevin Stefanski's decision before the half? 60-yard field goal that he decides to go for the Hail Mary instead. Watson had already gone to the locker room. PJ Walker was the guy put in to do it.
I think I saw a lot of people were up in arms about that. I wasn't that mad about it, just given how long of a field goal it was. And you just came off of the Browns blocking a long field goal with Justin Tucker. And so in my mind, I definitely think Kevin thought about it, but I was fine with it. I mean, once again, I was sitting there thinking, like, you're not going to win this game by kicking field goals. So whether he tries, misses, going to be mad, I was fine with it. I mean, no worries on my end.
Yeah, so I agreed with the decision of to go ahead and throw the Hail Mary, and there are several reasons why. One, the Browns did just block a field goal. By the way, that was a huge play in the game.
Amazing.
They had just blocked a field goal, and part of the problem is that like you are now asking Dustin Hopkins, who had made a 58-yard field goal against the Colts indoors. That was a career long at that point. This would be longer. The trajectory would be super low. You'd be going against arguably the best special teams, operation in the league, being that John Harbaugh is a special teams guy. They put a ton of time into it in practice. And you have a bunch of backups in your protection unit because obviously the Browns were shorthanded with the offensive line injuries and everything else. And whether it was blocked or the reason Kevin Stefanski provided was he was worried about a field goal return that the Ravens were putting a guy in the end zone to return the kick, is what I had just witnessed from Anthony Walker, who ran 27 yards back as I watched a 400-pound man slowly try to chase after him and was hysterical watching this. Daniel Falele of former Minnesota Golden Gopher. You have the slowest people on your team. And we've seen this play out in college. Obviously, the famous kick six. That's because you have the slowest people on the field. And the Ravens could go the exact other way and put a bunch of fast guys on there that would just create enough of a problem that you give up a touchdown. In which case, whether they block it and get a touchdown or they return it and get a touchdown, game's over because they're then going to get the ball. So to me, it wasn't worth it. The chances of being able to complete that kick weren't that much weren't that much better to me than having a Hail Mary thrown. Like neither was the chances were almost nil. But if I'm going to take almost nil, I'm going to go with the quarterback throwing it and potentially getting 6 points as opposed to all the bad things that could come out of going for 3. And had that happened, everybody would absolutely kill Kevin Stefanski. All these people are saying, oh, you should have kicked the field goal. This was a foreseeable, very easy to predict bad outcome, and the Browns avoided it, which I thought was the right decision.
But people were ready to fire him at halftime. Let's just like level set for a minute here. I think people were really upset he didn't go for it. And they were mad about the score and how the Browns were losing, and they wanted him gone immediately.
Yeah. So, and that was all the things that sort of led you to believe that the Browns had a chance to win this game. Block the field goal. They get points off that. They get the interception. I think they got a field goal off that. I could be wrong. They kept doing these things and then just not capitalizing. They weren't getting the touchdowns, but they were doing a whole bunch of good things. In the second half, when they came out, there were just so many things offensively I felt like that went right. Certainly Deshaun Watson played better. Whatever reason it is, Payne seems to focus him in a way that nothing else does. And he saw the field better. He was making good decisions. And the Browns were doing things that just sort of were calling concepts that really played against what the Ravens want to do. And some of that was passing. Some of that was the stuff to like David Njoku, just simple underneath stuff because the Ravens were trying to keep everything in front of them. And then the other part that was good throughout the game was the rushing attack. And Jerome Ford had his best game as a Cleveland Brown, far and away. And I have my super hot take for this game is I don't know if the Browns win this game if James Hudson is not in at right tackle. And I know people are going to be like, oh, his PFF grade is awful. And he was terrible in pass protection. And you're right. He was awful at all of those things. But his physicality was like just for this moment of him and Wyatt Teller just kicking ass up front on so many of these run plays. I charted it out. Jerome Ford had 11 carries for 88 yards just going to the right behind those two guys. And you saw some of the things from Jerome Ford. The Nick Chubbiest run of the season not made by Nick Chubb was that 28-yard run where they run that slight delay. Jerome Ford hits up the middle, gets clogged, immediately spins off it as if that would, without a hesitation, goes right past Wyatt Teller, who absolutely killed the guy in front of him, effortlessly stiff arms the defender and just runs up the sideline until he's eventually tackled out of bounds. Like it looked like that's always how he's played. And to me, that was the play where you're going, yeah, that would be what Nick Chubb would do in that situation. That is who he is. I just Jerome Ford has been such a frustrating player because he's clearly got ability. He's the most talented back on this roster by far, not named Nick Chubb. And this game showed all of the things where he's really, really good as a runner. Just get behind your pads. And I think in a lot of ways, whether it was him or coaching or both or whatever, it seemed like he had this mindset of, I'm going to make them prove they can tackle me every single time. And I think that was a big part of what sort of led to their success late in the game, is I think the Browns just wore them down to a point where they were ready to be done. And like, we'll get there, but like the play at the end broke the Ravens. Straight up broke the Ravens.
Just, first of all, you're talking about the big pile push, right?
Yes.
Okay, I thought so. First of all, the Baldinger breakdown on that
Awesome.
was incredible. That was actually my favorite player of the entire game. And it was heavily competing with David Njoku, just bulldozing people and getting additional yards. I probably watched that replay no less than 20 times, maybe more, probably not more than the Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce kiss, but it was up there with my rewatches. And I was laughing just at the turn of events because the pile was being pushed. And then you see Joel Bitonio come join the party, if you will. And then maybe my most favorite part about my favorite play was Elijah Moore.
Yes.
Getting his little arms in there and his legs are like pumping a mile a minute. And he was so cute. Like, I'm going to help push this pile forward. And he looked like a little toothpick compared to all of the linemen. And then, even more so, it was awesome to see them so fired up after that. James Hudson,
James Hudson. Yeah.
Came up punching air. And some would say at that point was when we should have known they were going to win this football game.
Yeah.
So telling, just so telling.
There's just something about James Hudson and Wyatt Teller really seem to like playing together because they just fire each other up. And you saw the number of times where Wyatt Teller just destroyed guys on blocks. And like, just those two getting fired up, that play, certainly you see James Hudson go right through the pile and punch in air and everything. Elijah Moore genuinely looked like a little kid. It looked like a kid helping the adults.
It looked like Maddox,
yes.
would run in and just throw himself into the mix.
But like, to me, that play was sort of and Kevin Stefanski was, I'd written this before, but Kevin Stefanski was asked if he thought that was the symbol of the season. Now, he deferred immediately because that's who he is and said, you can write that. But to me, it felt like that's who this team has been, particularly in these 5 games since the bye week, where it was like Jerome Ford would have gotten about 5 yards on that run, just as it was. They ran a trap. I've seen any number of people that call it power counter. That's a trap, and the Ravens couldn't stop it. And you saw it. You saw Jerome Ford runs through, and he runs into Roquan Smith and Marcus Williams, who are sort of stood up. Jerome Ford's pad levels down, and then you just start seeing the guys, James Hudson, Wyatt Teller, and then Joel Bitonio gets in there, and they just keep adding to this pile. Cedric Tillman was in there somehow. By the way, Cedric Tillman is a very large human being. My God, he stands out physically. And it was sort of this, just like the epitome of everything they want to be. Not only did you had a bunch of guys who weren't supposed to be out there relative to this season, in James Hudson, in Jerome Ford, in Cedric Tillman, in Jerron Christian. These aren't guys who were supposed to be on it, but whatever this team has going for it, it doesn't matter. Like, as long as you're willing to put it all out there, you're part of this thing. And so they ended up with like 9 guys driving this pile forward, and the Ravens got beat, gave up. They knew it was over. Second that happened, they go from what was a 5-yard run to a 12-yard run, and the decisive first down that set up the game-winning field goal. So there's just this mentality, seeming sort of, I guess, symbolism in this case of the Browns can be an absolute mess for most of the 59 minutes that had led up to the point where they were losing for 59 minutes and 20 for 59-40 of this game. But as long as all these guys are finally willing to lay it on, are willing to continue to lay it on the line, they can ultimately push through and make it happen, which is what transpired in that moment and allowed them to just sort of break through in a lot of ways, not just break through for the sake of that moment, but just break through in terms of beating another team that nobody thought they could beat, again, including us. We're not confident they could win that game. And just, this is another game where, like, win or lose, I was proud of this team for being who they are. And yet again, just like with the 49ers game, they find a way. It's just really fun to watch this team, because whatever you think about certain players on this team, like the sum is certainly greater. The sum is certainly greater than the parts in this case. You take some of the individuals on this team and they are not good football players, but for whatever reason, added together, they are enough to overcome basically anything.
Well, to me, this is a turning point for all of us. And I know that someone say that the 49ers game was maybe that turning point, but the 49ers game didn't have all of our parts and they still somehow found a way to win. But for me, the reason why I'm saying that this was kind of a turning point was because there were so many things going against them. There were so many excuses that they could have used to not win this football game. There were turnovers that led to direct points. There were massive penalties that changed trajectory of plays. There were injuries. There were guys that had to step up to play different positions that they haven't played this season. And I know that I tweeted a little bit about this last night, but I do just want to talk about it a little bit, Pete. I was very negative all day yesterday because of our past. It's something that has continuously haunted us as Browns fans. There have been so many different ways that this Browns team has lost, even in moments where you think that the game's over and that they should win. They've been defeated, and it's been years of that. It's been years of heartbreak. It's been years of disappointment. It's been years of frustration. It's been a revolving door for players, for coaches. And so we've never really gotten comfortable with being uncomfortable. And this game was exactly an uncomfortable situation that came down to them not giving up. It came down to players having to step up. And I will be the first to admit that I've been jealous of other teams kind of being able to do more with less and to win games that they shouldn't be winning. I mean, hello, Pittsburgh Steelers, who we're going to face on Sunday. But like now, Pete, I think we all have to collectively come together and realize and admit that this Browns football team has a chance to win every single game that they play, regardless of the circumstances and the adversity that happens in game. And I'm saying this to myself because I was not in this mindset, but I think now we have to get there. We have to start having the mindset of this team has a chance to win. And it doesn't matter what the score is until the clock strikes 0, there's a chance.
Well, the short version is One Thornhill was right. He said he was going to, he said you needed to believe in this team, that all these people, all the fans who came at him said, oh, we've heard this before. And he said, no, we're going to be good. He's right.
Well, in all fairness, I understand why the fans were obviously, they didn't want to believe it, because until you start showing us, then that's it. But that's why I'm saying, like, this game was a turning point because they showed us. Like, this was like, you guys need to get behind us. And we do. I do. Hello. It's me. I'm the problem, Pete. It's me.
Yeah. I mean, the relentless positivity coming out of that organization is real in what it's allowing them to do. What I found funny is, and we talked about this with Kevin Stefanski, is like people have bent over backwards to not give him credit for some of the things that are going right, like creating the culture. Like, I heard Ken Carmen talk about this, and I like Ken Carmen quite a bit, very supportive. But at the same time, he's like, well, Kevin Stefanski has sort of allowed these players to lead themselves, and he's right, but that's not by accident. Like they've been fostering this environment of saying, we want to give you ownership, we want to make this your team. Like that's a skill. That's not something where you go, oh, he's hands off. He just sort of allowed it to happen. No, he worked at this. The organization has worked to garner this, to get a whole bunch of guys that are taking ownership and responsibility, and like they play for each other, even when they don't know who the guy is, or maybe he arrived 10 days ago, like in the case of Jaron Christian. They play for that guy, and that guy played for them. And there's something about that. Like, I don't, I want the Browns to be more than one. We talk about this, and we like when it comes to Jim Schwartz or something, like everybody wants there to be a hero, like one guy who has figured out how to make this thing work, when the reality is what you're seeing is a collective, because they've had any number of people out. Like Deshaun Watson was supposed to be the thing that was going to fix this. And in this game, he fixed it. But like in other games where they went 2-1 with PJ Walker, he couldn't do anything in those games. So somebody else had to step up. So it has to be more than one guy. In the case of what the Browns have built, and Kevin Stefanski certainly warrants credit for it, is that they built this thing into everybody has a share in ownership of this, and who deserves credit, and everything that goes into it is really, really important. And I think people really need to grasp onto the fact that like there are a lot of organizations around the NFL who are jealous of what the Browns have right now. Like right now, we are recording this. I see the Buffalo Bills are playing Monday Night Football. The Buffalo Bills have had 2 players only meetings this year. This is a team that was supposed to be really good, and yet they're having all these problems. Allegedly, I mean, to the extent you want to make a players only meeting a problem, the Browns haven't been doing that. They've put so much work into this over the course of the years that the guys trust each other, and you have guys signing here for less in some circumstances because they want to be a part of this thing, and they want to be involved in this. And I think I don't think people appreciate like how unique that is, in terms of like, that is what teams want to have, and the Browns have managed to find it. Now, could there be a scenario where we see this thing fall apart at some point? Maybe, but like right now, it is difficult to ignore because you see it every week and who they are, and like they have more fight than the fans have had, and that's not a criticism of the fans. I totally understand it. Like the Browns have been the deadbeat dad of sports organizations for so long that they've let you down so many times that at some point you
the
stop
lovable
believing.
Losers, right? And the punchline, and
But this
good.
is like this is like this is the stepdad that has shown up and is like consistently delivering for you, even when they don't win. They like give you an effort. You're like, wow, this didn't work out like I hoped it would. But they were really impressive in sort of their fight. Or in the case that they are winning a lot of these games because they have so many guys. The number of players who came up in this game with big plays that either we had, some of us, like, if you were a Ravens fan on this game, you had to be either looking up on the internet or your phone or whatever, going, who the hell is Mike Ford? And how did he just intercept this pass or knock my quarterback on his ass? Or that, Jordan Elliott, who's Jordan Elliott that's blocking this kick? Who are some of these guys that are making plays? I have no idea who some of these guys are. And that's just sort of who the Browns have been. Like when Denzel Ward and Juan Thornhill go down, you should, like, by all rights, you should be getting killed at that point. The game should be over. And yet, they just continue to bring this never-ending sort of relentless effort. And like, to your point, like I remember the first time around, there were people were like annoyed that like, oh, the Ravens could sign Kyle Van Noy off the street and he could contribute for them. He didn't. Well, one, he didn't contribute in this game other than getting his ass kicked. But 2, the Browns have a list of these guys you can sit there and point to, and you're like, wow, yeah, this guy's contributed. This guy's contributed. Like, I give so much crap to Kareem Hunt, most of it warranted, but like, it was moving watching him on that 17 play drive that went for 75 yards. The Browns' longest play on that drive was 11 yards. The Ravens did not commit a penalty. The Browns had to earn it the whole way down the field. And then you watch Kareem Hunt behind a block by Leroy Watson the fourth, the offensive tackle that the Browns have recently brought in, those were his first NFL snaps ever. And Kareem Hunt just was like slowed down and sort of bent an awkward angle. And he just said, no, I'm getting in the end zone, and punched it in. And like, it is a moving experience to watch this team, which is why, the Arizona Cardinals game was almost boring because I didn't have the constant stress level of this team driving me nuts or exhilarating me with what they were able to do. I mean, look, the amount of times this game should have been over, and the James Prochet muffed punt was sort of like the epitome of how is this game not over? Like that was it. The Browns.
I thought 100% after that. Like, I mean, you know me, I'd thrown in the towel like very early on, but then that like really did me in.
It was a gut punch. It was just this gut punch because the Browns had worked so hard. They
were down by a touchdown, right?
Yes, they were down by a touchdown. The defense came up big. They got them off. That may have been the drive where Myles Garrett had 2 sacks. I'm not sure. And they do this, and it's a can of corn fair catch, and he just drops the ball. And the Ravens get it and have an incredibly long drive relative to where they are on the field.
I felt so bad for him after that.
He was just devastated to watch this guy who was a hero the week before.
Yeah, and he
punt returns.
Was a former Ravens guy, right?
Yes, he had been on the Ravens, which I'm sure prompted some double agent talk. But anyway, it was just that any number of years, that's where the game ends and the ride is over, even though the Browns fought. And again, this is another situation they would not allow that to happen. So let's get into some of the sort of things that really stood out in this one. Deshaun Watson in the second half, as I mentioned, the 14-14. But overall, what I really liked was, and it sort of snuck up on you if you weren't sort of like looking at it, the way the Browns target breakdown went was 9 to Amari Cooper, 9 to David Njoku, and 7 to Elijah Moore. Like, this was the balance game in terms of getting the ball out to your weapons. For all the things we've talked about, which just goes to show, how insane this game was. Amari Cooper, again, phenomenal. Just continues to be. And like I saw this mentioned on Twitter, something, who's the best receiver since 1999 for the Browns? It's Amari Cooper. It's not even close right now. And Josh Gordon was phenomenal for a moment. And there have been other players that have been very good at points, but Amari Cooper makes you forget. Like you mentioned Odell Beckham and your daughter being like, he's on the team. Like, other than when I see him in games, like with the Ravens, Amari Cooper has made me not think about any of that stuff because he's been so good. He's been better than those guys. Made a monster play on the 2nd and 19. That was after the sack on Deshaun Watson, where Jaron Christian got beat by Dafe Owe and they fumbled. Fortunately, Wyatt Teller was there. There are all these people who, hey, Jaron Christian should start for this team. It was like, easy. If the Ravens recover that fumble like the Steelers did in week 2, everybody would hate Jaron Christian with a passion and want him gone. He did an admirable job, but let's keep that where it is. The next play is when Amari Cooper comes up with that 17-yard catch. They get the ball short yardage and they convert. And he was just great. Again, the one guy on the Browns you knew had to be good, the guy you had to sort of stop, Amari Cooper, 98 yards. You mentioned David Njoku. I looked this up because I was listening to Jake Burns talk about this. David Njoku has 377 receiving yards this season. 317 of those are after the catch. That's 84%.
That is wild.
Yes, because all the time he's getting these short passes and he just runs through people for so many yards.
Kareem Hunt is the shopping cart equivalent. David Njoku is a gazelle. He's going so fast, but he doesn't look like it.
No, like, to me, he's a thoroughbred where he just.
Yeah, thoroughbred's probably better than a gazelle, but a gazelle's so graceful.
He's so powerful in how he goes, and you're just,
he's gotten into this mode where he starts going, you're like, how do they bring this man down?
Yeah.
He just will not be denied.
Okay, well, he also like warms up without his shirt on before every game, and so you can see his chiseled physique, which I feel like that's by design. He's not dumb in doing that. Just saying.
Well, they're for two sets of people. One, the other team, then two, Anyway,
I don't know. No, because people are gonna now be like,
listen. He's not stupid.
I'm just saying between him and Myles Garrett is notoriously doing post-game press conferences or Thursday press conferences with no shirts on. And then you have David Njoku doing pre-game warm-ups with no shirts on, regardless of the weather, mind you. And I feel like it's just like, yeah, try to stop me. I look like this. Like, just a reminder.
No, to me, I think when you're that big, you suddenly start suffering from a severe shirt allergy.
Okay. Explain
like,
that to my
seems
son.
To be that seems to be how it works. It's like, listen, no, I can't. I will break out. But yeah, I mean, they have two of the most fit people on the planet, like in terms of just like
no body fat. It's annoying.
Yeah, just ridiculously carved up like Adonis type figures, but like in the same way that it's different. But David Njoku is such a tone setter for how he plays, because he does those things. You're like, it's one of those players. You're like, if he's doing that, how do I not do my job, or how do I not give everything I have? And they have a lot of those type of guys. Certainly, Myles Garrett's in that club, but like, again, just impressive. 84% of his yardage after the catch, which, that's something I certainly hope that, with Watson, they can get better at, that they can get Njoku the ball down the field more. But that's certainly a huge weapon to have, to be able to throw the ball deep to Amari Cooper and then be able to take these simple underneath passes, be them screens or just quick hitches or whatever, where David Njoku is like, yeah, I'll get another 10, no problem. Elijah Moore gets his first touchdown reception of the year, which is certainly long overdue. But again, I think the more we see Watson and getting on track in that, I think this is going to be more of what you're going to see. That trio of guys had basically 200 yards receiving as a group. Certainly a critical component in winning that game, along with Jerome Ford and everything he was able to do. And just some of the things they were able to do. You saw, Harrison Bryant continues to be good at his little quarterback thing. And then the play, on the last play, the drive of the game, they went with that little shift where they shifted Harrison Bryant under center. It was 3rd and 1 or whatever. And it looked like, oh, Harrison Bryant's going to charge up the middle. Then he motions back out. And there's about 3 other things that move before the Browns snap the ball and then throw a pass to Jerome Ford in the flat for the first down. Had that not worked, I'm sure that would have been a play where they would have just been crushed, because it was another too cute play. But there were a lot of I thought Kevin Stefanski called a really good game offensively, between balancing run and the pass, particularly late in the game. And just, again, the Ravens are a really good defense. They have an outstanding defensive coordinator who's really highly regarded because of the amount of things they do that cause teams problems and confusion. And the Browns were just like, do all that stuff you want. We're just going to run right through you and make simple passes, and you're not going to be able to defend them. And they were right. I think in a lot of ways, I don't want to say it makes up for the Seattle game, because that game's always going to be there. But like, this was a game where you can definitely put it in they won this game in no small part because of Kevin Stefanski. And that's not to take away anything from Deshaun Watson. His second half was outstanding and was critical in winning the game, but certainly Kevin Stefanski deserves a ton of credit for that.
Yeah, I'm honestly really looking forward to Sunday. I was looking forward to yesterday's game too against the Ravens, but like now, kind of coming off of that second half and the momentum, hopefully, of this offense and Kevin Stefanski and all of his kind of adjustments and all of his schemes, and obviously like the offensive line, like once again, like I know that there were some penalties there, but like you didn't hear much about the offensive line, and you should have, right? Because like just thinking about their starters that were missing, like they played a great game. And so I'm really looking forward to this matchup against the Steelers, and I just hope we get like a masterclass ass beating with Kevin Stefanski kind of drawing things up like they did a couple years ago in the playoffs. Like I cannot wait.
What's weird, and I think you and I were sort of in the same boat. We sort of waited. I don't want to say on pins and needles, but we all sort of collectively sort of clinched for the week leading up to the Ravens game. And I think the way they won has made it so now people are really excited for the Steelers game in a way that they weren't for that Ravens game. I think everybody's sort of waiting to see what was going to happen for all the reasons, not having all the offensive tackles, not having all these things. Deshaun Watson, yes, he played really well against Arizona, but the Cardinals aren't very good. And the Ravens are a good team. And what's that going to look like? And I think having gotten through that, I think collectively everybody's way more excited about the Steelers game and what it can mean. And, just feeling good about being able to host that team and feel good about the Browns' chances. And there's a part of me that doesn't care if they win or lose this game just because they've done so well and get like the Ravens game was the biggest one of their season by far, not just because it was the game that they played that week, though that's certainly a critical factor. They could not afford to lose the tiebreaker to the Ravens and be down like 4. The Browns were going, if they lose, it was wild card or bust at that point. There's only 3 in the conference, and suddenly the Browns still could get to 10 wins, but they had so little room for error. Now they're right back in the division race, and they only need 4 wins to get to 10, which is the number we all sort of picked out ahead of the season and went, if they get to 10 wins, they're in good shape. And the other part about that is like, when you look at the remaining strength of schedule, the Browns have the easiest strength of schedule out of the teams in the AFC North because the Browns played that awful stretch to start the year, and all the other teams in the AFC North had relatively easy stretches to start out the season, and now it's reversing. Like I went through in an article and like broke it down, and like if you were choosing which path to take, it's not even close. You take the Browns easily over the other teams, which again gives them a possible not just to get to the playoffs, but may have a shot at the division at this point, which they have not won since 1989, which is insane.
Listen, I can't even begin to think about that.
Well, we'll go defense then in terms of just what we saw, because this is another game where all hands were on deck. Again, I hated the initial game plan, but I really liked the way that Jim Schwartz threw multiple looks at Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson was fine. He was not great like he was in the first game for at least a couple drives where he was just otherworldly. That never happened in this game. He made some mistakes. The Browns did a good job of sort of forcing him to be uncomfortable. They got a ton of pressure on him. But like this was a game where Myles Garrett had a sack and a half, but he only had 4 pressures in the game. Like they needed other guys to do other things. Myles Garrett had to be more of a run defender in this one because they were worried about some of the stuff the Ravens were doing. And you saw a lot of other guys step and make plays. Like obviously with the Ravens, one of the first guys that everybody thinks about is JOK. Like JOK is impressive against the Ravens typically, and this was no exception. He played well. Grant Delpit played pretty well. I thought Zadarius Smith played really like one of his better games on the defensive line. I think he sort of, this was a game where it justified bringing him in and showing why he was so effective. Part of the reason for that is both he and Myles Garrett were phenomenal in pursuit of just trying to chase down Lamar Jackson, taking good angles to give him trouble and force him to throw the ball away at points. And I thought that was really important for this game. Shelby Harris played, again, another solid performance. Jordan Elliott didn't do anything particularly effective as a defender, but obviously the block kick was big. They just kept getting contributions from guys that everybody had to make a play in this game. Like we talked about, Mike Ford, Rodney McLeod had to play a whole bunch because Juan Thornhill went out with the injury. Dalvin Tomlinson was robbed of a sack because of one of the many penalties in this game on the Browns defense. I thought Alex Wright did some good things, even though PFF does not like him because he's sort of a wild man, which I get, but I still like what he does. Obo Okoronkwo, Inconsistent in this one, but he had some important plays, and obviously one of the biggest of the game. His rush to force he got a great punch on Ravens replacement right tackle Patrick Macari, shoved him back, was able to get his hands up, and I don't know, whether it was his head or his hands that the ball hit. Ball goes straight up. Greg Newsome's able to intercept it. His first interception ever, is able to run it back in the end zone. Greg Newsome, who was a game time decision, probably happy he made the decision or that he was healthy enough to go in this one. And he had to make a bunch of adjustments. So obviously when Denzel Ward went out, he had to play some outside corner as well as in the slot and had to respond. So you just saw, again, collectively, a lot of things. You're sitting there going, yes, team defense. Contrasted against the first game where we watched and we're sort of like, it seemed like the defense was waiting for Myles Garrett to do something. This was a game where it felt like the Browns, I think, felt like they belonged more in this one and felt like they were ready to sort of just match up and didn't think the moment was too big for them, didn't think the opponent was too big for them, and just played to the bitter end.
Yeah, like I said at the beginning, they looked exhausted, but like they gave everything that they had. And I have to admit, I went to the bathroom during the pick six. Literally stepped away for like 30 seconds because I had to. And I'm there and I hear my husband start yelling, run, run, run. Like, and my husband's pretty like low key during the games. Like, he's pretty level headed. He never yells like that. And I was like, if you are yelling because you are like pranking me, I'm going to be so mad. And then I came out and the replay was happening. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? I step away for 30 seconds and this is what happened. So
I got a text.
I thought I was going to have to stay in the bathroom for the rest of the game.
I got a text in all caps. I just went to pee. After that interception, it was just so bizarre because, again, it was just the weirdness of the game where it was just like, the Browns
bounced so high.
Yes.
Also,
the
he was probably like, I really didn't need to know that. I don't need to know your bathroom habits, but like you needed the context of why that was important.
The Browns had just scored, and obviously, the Ravens got the ball back, and the Browns were down a touchdown at that point, and then they immediately get that ball, it pops straight in the air, he intercepts it, and you're sitting there going, "Oh, it's gonna be a tie game," and then of course they missed the extra point, which is weird. I wish somebody would have asked Kevin Stefanski why they didn't go for two when they were down when they scored to make it a 2-score deficit. So it would have been 30 or so. Yeah, when it was 31-20, when it was 31-17, they scored. Why did he not then try the 2-point conversion? They had just gotten the first one. But there's the argument that the math suggests that if you go for two the first time, because if you get it down 2 scores, if you get the first time, then at that point you put pressure on the other team. If you don't get it, well, you can still go get the 2-point conversion, and then you have tied the game. Instead, the Browns opted to do it the theoretically wrong way based on the results of, well, they just went extra point both times and they missed the extra point. Having said that, it was weird. If you listen to Dustin Hopkins in the post game, he thought that those 2 kicks sort of helped him figure out what was wrong and fix it for the last one. So who knows? Maybe they needed that to happen, but I'm surprised that wasn't asked, because that's typically sort of a thing you might do. And it may be as simple as, hey, the Ravens defense is really good. We didn't want to sort of chance it if we didn't have to, but just an interesting decision. And ultimately, again, another situation where, hey, this game could be tied, but instead, no, we've got to be stressed out because we're down 1 and the Browns still have to score again. They're losing. So yeah, again, a weird game from that standpoint.
But like everything was so, and I know we talked about that a little bit too, but like it was just such a frustrating experience because, and I tweeted about this too, and maybe this was being in my negative space a little bit, but I felt like every time the Browns did something good, like 3 bad things happened. It like I literally felt like I was living in a Dr. Seuss book. Like just like that was like a prime example. You get the pick 6, you miss the extra point. Like I was like, I can't like you like just give us a break. Like something happened to just give us a moment to breathe a little bit. And we didn't get that obviously until 3 seconds left on the clock. Actually, until there was no time left on the clock.
Yeah, I mean, it was a sloppy game. Like it was. The Browns were sloppy in this game.
Well, and like that's what's even more just amazing about the whole thing was they still figured out a way to win. And like the sloppiness was on both sides of the ball. Like the defense made some critical errors. And I know that you could probably challenge some of those flags didn't need to be thrown, but they were, and they were at critical times. I mean, I think I wrote down, and it ended up not even mattering, I guess, but like there were a couple of things that I wrote down where like the defense sacks Lamar or like makes a huge play and then a penalty just completely negated it. And so like it was things like that just, or like a hold, you know, a defensive holding call.
There were a lot of them too.
Yeah, like just so many of those like little tic tac things. But listen, you take away those 14 points that the Ravens scored on Brown's turnovers, and like the defense played really well. They were able to contain Lamar. I like the things that they were doing. Yeah, they got burned a couple of times, but like at the end of the day, like that second half, outside of the OBJ slant pass, like they didn't do much, Pete. And again, like this is a story kind of all year with the defense. If the Browns weren't giving up touchdowns on offensive turnovers, like this defense looks even better.
Very strange game by the numbers. For example, the Ravens averaged 6.1 yards per play, but they were 2 of 8 on third down.
I was going to say, where'd they end up in third downs? That's amazing.
Yeah, the Browns were 8 of 16 on third down. Obviously a big factor.
Wow.
2 on fourth. The Ravens had 17 first downs in the whole game. The Browns had 10 penalties for 55 yards. The Ravens had 7 for 64. Obviously, one of those was a big pass interference call on Cedric Tillman.
Yep.
Where the DB just decided, hey, I get to shove you out of bounds. The Ravens only completed 13 passes the whole game. Like it's weird.
Really?
They went 13. Lamar Jackson finished 13 of 23 for 223.
23 passes.
Yeah, it was 1 touchdown and the 2 picks. They ran the ball 24 times for 106 yards. Like,
okay.
The thing that like you sit there and go, well, how did the Browns win? Because the Ravens had 306 total yards. Well, they only had 50 plays. The Browns had 75.
My gosh, that's wild.
And that's a huge difference. Even though the Browns.
What was the time of possession, Pete?
Time of possession, the Ravens had it for 25-45. The Browns had it for 34-15.
Yeah, okay.
A decent difference. But like, this is where, the Ravens were more efficient in a lot of ways. Offensively, you look at things like yards per play and stuff. But the Browns had Browns were 5 yards per play, but they had for 75 plays, and it just added up to where they ended up with 337 total yards, and just sort of wore the Ravens defense out. And then,
well, that's the thing. That's the other thing, though. Those turnovers that they got points from, they didn't really have to do much. Like how many plays did they run on? Like they were in such good position to score. Obviously, the first one they literally had to do nothing.
And then in the second half, the Ravens scored 2 touchdowns on the first 3 drives, but the Browns were able to force 2 punts and get the pick 6. Whereas, like I mentioned earlier, the Browns had 3 possessions and scored on all of them. It's just such a weird way for that game to work out. It's because it's not as if the Ravens were bad in the second half necessarily relative to being able to score points, but they really struggled after that first drive in the third quarter. Like the James Prochet muff, the Ravens needed 7 plays to get the 12 yards to score. It was just because it was just a bizarre circumstance. And obviously one of those things was, they got bailed out on penalties, the one on JOK, which was a penalty, but there's another one that was sort of fishy that may have allowed them to hold it to a field goal. And it just seemed like it was meant to be that they were going to score a touchdown just by that series of events. But the Browns just dominated the second half. in a way that the Ravens just could not, recover from. So, yeah, I mean, you just sort of, again, the Browns were a sloppy football team for so much of this game, but they figured it out. They were a better running team. For half the game, they were the better passing team. The defense was better in the half that the Browns needed to be better in. It just allowed them to get, a huge win and allow, again, if you're the Ravens, you're sitting there, you mentioned the Jets game. I agree. The similarities are eerie. They're up 2 scores. They're that far away from having the division locked up, essentially.
What was the percentage of them winning? Like I would love, that little chart.
The
that shows,
AWS things and all that. I hate that thing because every time it's 99%. And yet the amount of times where clearly just the math cannot possibly, that would suggest like 1 out of 100 or some of these cases, like 1 out of 1,000. And I feel like I've seen 5 this year. So apparently we're due for about 5,000 to go the other way. It's just it's insane. Like again, all this talk about the Browns never led in this game relative to regulation. The Ravens had the lead from 59-40 until the end of regulation. Like all these things are improbable. And you again, that Jets comparison, the Ravens were on that ugly side of history. They're the first team or fourth team or whatever since 1906 to give up a lead this late in the game and all these things. Like those were all the things that you saw the Browns have with the Jets. So, again, credit to everybody on this team-wide win. So now we're sitting here going, all the Browns are 6-3. The Steelers are 6-3, which is, I don't know. I look at this game and I think it's going to be difficult just because the nature of the beast. Nothing's easy with this team for one, and the Steelers are a pain in the ass for two. But I also simultaneously, I don't know anyone who looks at these two teams and thinks they're relatively even. I think pretty universally people are looking at the Steelers team and go, how the hell are they doing this? Which included another incredibly officiating call where the ball clearly goes backwards. And even on review, it clearly went backwards. And whether it was the officials in the game would go, well, incomplete, or Gene Steratore was like, there's not enough evidence, despite the fact everybody can plainly see this thing went backwards.
He said there's not enough evidence, and they had a replay.
Yes,
oh my god!
Look it up. You can look up the clip. I'll send it to you. And the Packers had picked up the ball and scored, and they took it off the board.
I didn't realize this. I was not following any of the other games yesterday. So
it's just another one of those games where the Steelers
get bailed out,
and they're 6-3, and it's going to be interesting because the Steelers have injury issues all over their team. They've lost a week after losing their best linebacker for the year in Cole Holcomb in an ugly, ugly knee injury, which was incredibly strange because he's getting dealt with on the field, and TJ Watt is dapping up DeAndre Hopkins. I'm sitting there going, wait, what? Your dudes over there go there. He's in bad shape. Anyway, this week they lose Quan Alexander for the year, their other inside linebacker, so they're going to have both backups. I don't think Minkah we'll see. I don't know if Minkah Fitzpatrick's going to be back for this game. So they've got a share of problems that they're dealing with. Deshaun Watson's got a high ankle sprain. He says he'll play. I assume he'll play, but we'll see. Denzel Ward's neck is probably okay. We didn't get a whole lot of information on Juan Thornhill. Is DeJuan Jones going to be back? Who knows? So you've got both these teams are sort of beat up and everything that's going on. You have a lot of emotions because one, it's the Steelers, and then two, it's not lost on these players that the first game is the one they lost Nick Chubb. And I think even if they're not going to say it is the Fitzpatrick, who may not even play in this game, was dirty. I have to imagine that there's some extra little thing that they want to win this one for Nick.
Yeah, I would say yes. I feel like that I forgot that Steelers game that I don't know how I could forget. That's the Nick Chubb injury. And listen, you can't tell me that they weren't impacted by losing him the way that they lost him in that game. Like they definitely
Yeah.
felt rattled. And so I do think there's a lot of motivation behind this game, not only obviously being a division rival, how meaningful this game could be for the Browns, the fact that it's at home. I am so fired up for this game. I'm going on Sunday. I cannot wait to be there in person. I hope that it does not get infiltrated with a bunch of Steelers fans. So Browns fans, you better show up. And I hope the fans make a significant impact. And I hope that, like I said, Kevin Stefanski outcoaches Mike Tomlin because I think that he can. I hope Myles Garrett gets like 6 sacks on Kenny Pickett. I hope that the Steelers go scoreless. I'm ready. I'm ready for this one. I mean, listen, you heard Kevin. They worked today.
Yes,
they were in the building.
Yes, that was awesome that they were.
Kevin was emoting.
Yes,
like there's a lot. Like there's a lot, Pete. There's a lot. The emoting of Kevin Stefanski was dropping F-bombs in the locker room. Practice today. I mean, I'm fired up.
Well, film today and all that, but
still.
But you're right. No, here's what I want. Here's what I'm hoping for this week. One, that the fans don't care. Don't look at the score. Just be a pain in the, just be awesome.
Yes,
for 60
be what they have always been to other teams when they have no business. Actually, here's the thing, though. They literally have no business beating the Browns. Like the Browns are such a better football team. Like it shouldn't even be close.
And then the other thing I hope happens is I hope Nick gives a speech, and it doesn't need to be a long speech. It may be only
Chubby, Nicky Chubb.
Yes, I hope Chubb gives a little something.
I hope he does the guitar smash.
That may be I've seen people talk about they hope Nick Chubb does the guitar smash or whatever. But if it's just a little thing before they go out for the game,
what's he gonna say?
I don't know, because it might be short. It might be real quick and just be, man, a few words type thing. Or maybe he'll pour his heart out. I don't know, but that is what
he's going to post Batman on Instagram. 100%. That's what's going to happen.
I hope that they have, that he gets to do a little something that gives him a little extra, because, again, here, let's look at this. If the Browns win this game, and again, I'm not terribly worried about it just because of everything's gone so right for them that I'm not going to be crushed if they lose. But here's what's at stake. They win this game, they would then have, they would then have a 3-2 record in the division. They would be have tied everybody, have at worst tied, if not have the tiebreaker over every team in the division, which is important. And then they would be 8-3 or 7-3 at that point. And again, 3 games away from the 10 win mark, which we all hope for, but in a really commanding spot potentially for the division. The Steelers obviously would be down a game, which certainly would be helpful. So there's a lot there.
And the Ravens and Bengals play Thursday, right?
Yes, which is awesome because both teams are coming off painful losses. Both physically and
brutal,
both physically and sort of just emotionally
draining
to lose the way both of them did. But like the Bengals are going to be down multiple guys, the Ravens are going to be down multiple guys. I don't know if meteors are in the forecast for that game, but maybe. And then it's one of those things where you're sitting there going, if you're both the Browns and the Steelers this way, like, you have a massive opportunity to gain a ton of ground on both these teams, or they just wear each other out or whatever. It's all good for you. But and then the other thing that happens, regardless of whether the Browns beat the Steelers or not, but certainly would be helpful if they win. They don't play another division game until week 18. They're done, other than the Bengals game in the last season. And they own that tiebreaker. So the Bengals, who are in last in the division right now at a 5-4 record, if they try to mount a comeback, they will need to beat the Browns in that game. And it's a huge thing. So
what you're saying is the Browns control their destiny, which is something
they
that they're not used
control their destiny.
Yeah.
100%. Which is awesome for them. They've earned it. They've won so many of these games. You're sitting there going, man, I don't know how they're going to do it. They went 3-2 during that difficult stretch, despite losing players. They now find themselves 6-3 in a spot where I think this might have been on schedule relative to what we thought coming into the season, but I don't think it would have worked out the way it's worked in terms of who they've beaten. So it's it's all on that. It's all there for them to play for, which is exactly what we want. And certainly the Steelers represent a golden opportunity to just step on the throat of this team and make it painfully clear that this is their division to lose at that point, or at least come down to the wire, which is great. Given everything that's gone for this season, it would be tremendous for them, the Browns, to basically come out of nowhere in that regard and just suddenly be the team to beat in this division. If you check the probabilities and stuff, I think the Ravens are still like a little under 50% to win the division. The Browns are like about 30%, if you want to get into that. But the Browns are like 70-some% to make the playoffs right now, which was up from like what would have been 40-some had they lost to the Ravens, which is crazy to think about. But that's how pivotal that matchup was. So it's and the other part about that, if they win the Steelers, like if fans aren't on board at that point, I don't need them. Like any fan who's not willing to jump on that point, go away. I can't at that point. The amount of people who have sort of like spent, like, come on. Like, again, I'm prepared to have to talk people off the ledge if they then try to shit on everything because the Browns lose this game. But if they win, come on, man, unbridled enthusiasm the rest of the way. You have to be at that point. And the other part about that is that, like, the Browns are running out of home games.
Yes.
They've played so many home games so fast this year. Like the Steelers, and they've got some left, but the Steelers are one of their last ones. I think they go on the road for back-to-back games after this one.
They play Jacksonville on the 10th, and then the Jets are at home, which maybe Aaron Rodgers could be back for that Thursday night game.
Well, and that's assuming the Jets are viable, but yeah.
Bears are at home.
And the Bears. So, like,
I feel like, to be honest, I feel like the Steelers have had a million home games already.
They're in the same boat.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like every time I turn them on, they're at home.
Their end of the season is rough. For those reasons,
travel.
They have a bunch of difficult road games at the end of the year. So yeah, you're 100% right. So it's a big game. I am.
Did you just see what happened?
Yes.
Yeah, same.
Anyway, look. This has been an awesome week for the Browns. And again, I think a lot of people were in the same boat as you and I were, where they were all sort of tense, waiting to see what happened with this Ravens game. And now that it's happened, I think people can just be excited and be really excited to get, pregame or whatever they're going to do to be at the stadium and just sort of enjoy this and see what happens on Sunday. But like, this is where the Browns wanted. It has been a clunky ride, but this is exactly where the Browns wanted to be coming into the season. And now they're finally maybe getting there, and that's certainly worth enjoying. So, as always, if you want to support the podcast and help us out, like us, subscribe, tell a friend, all those things. Certainly, we always appreciate people who reach out and continue to say nice things to us. So. We'll be back next week. Hopefully, both of us are still here. We'll see how the first 5 minutes of the game goes, and we'll see how we'll see how it goes.